This episode was originally published in March of 2025.
There was a guy who ran for sheriff out in a little town in West Texas one time, and his campaign slogan was, "It takes one to catch one." And that's not all that serious, but it was pretty funny. He didn't win. March 17th in 1950, the FBI's 10 most wanted list started. And so it was 75 years old last week. And a guy by the name of Bill Hutchinson, who later became head of United Press International, was at a cocktail party one night. J. Edgar Hoover was there, and they were talking about, catching people and getting the public to focus. And so Hutchinson came up with the idea about, having the 10 most wanted list.
At a cocktail party?
At a cocktail party. Huh. And they had a few drinks, and it sounded like a good idea. And so they got together and worked it up and started using it. And they've had all kinds of results. There was one guy, and I was trying to look at his name here, Victor Garena. He was on the list for 32 years, and they never caught him.
Really? What did he do? And
he is a bank robber. And with some other people, and he was involved in the underground movement in Puerto Rico. And, he had ties to the people that tried to assassinate some of the members of Congress in the House back in the 40s, or early 50s. And but they never caught him. And after a while, I'd taken him off long before 32 years, but they didn't give up. They were still after him. And they don't know. They speculate that he died, or that somebody killed him over the money.
How much was it? Do you remember?
$7 million.
$7 million.
It's a Wells Fargo armored truck, and they got $7 million. And there was a group, and they do think that he may have been killed over the money, and some of the others took the money and ran with it. But they did catch some of the others that were involved in that robbery, but not Victor Garena. He fled the scene somehow, and they finally took him off the list. The shortest on the list was a guy that had killed 2 FBI agents, and he was on the list 2 hours.
2 hours.
They caught him pretty fast. When they were talking about starting the list, Hutchinson said if the general public sees that someone, they'll be watching for that face, and they'll be and so he really convinced J. Edgar Hoover that it was a good thing to do and they could really help. And I know John McCain said once you get on that list, the public cooperation is going to be try to get you stopped. And those are the good old days, the FBI, when they were trying to catch people that were criminals, not trying to make political trials. Mm-hmm. I don't know what will happen, but I think there's going to be some changes in the FBI. You had that 2 agents that they were having an affair, and they were sending notes to each other about how they were going to get Trump. Mm-hmm. And they usually, if you ever see that a public official's been indicted, the attorney general had to sign off on it. And usually they steer clear unless it's just an obvious case to them, but they'll still steer clear of trying to file charges on somebody in office or somebody that's running for office. Mm-hmm. And because you don't be like some countries where everyone that's on the losing side gets indicted, and then when they get elected the next time, they indict everyone on the other side. And so it's going to be interesting to what Kash Patel does in restructuring to be crime fighting and not political maneuvering. And they shouldn't be trying to get the Democrats or the Republicans, or anything. They ought to stay out of politics. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have some cases like Menendez. You're going to have some like that. Well, it didn't have anything to do with his politics. It had to do with him taking payments from some people that wanted favors. Mm-hmm. And so it was a different situation. And it's going to be interesting to watch, see what happens over the next year at the FBI, and if they're going to restructure or if they're going to start all over and start with a different name or something like that. But having the 10 most wanted on a list is something that's really worked well. And you've got programs on TV now that talk about the most wanted.
Do you remember going into the post office?
Yeah, they had their pictures up there.
Yeah,
still do.
Still do
with the numbers on them.
Mm-hmm.
And you go in and they mail those out and try to get as much publicity as possible. They've had there was one Whitey Bulger,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Whitey Bulger. His brother was Speaker of the House in the legislature in Boston,
mm-hmm.
Speaker of the House in the state of Massachusetts. And he was gone for 16 years, and they couldn't find him.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally found him because of a TV show, and a woman watching it said, that guy lives in our apartment complex. And she saw him some other time after that and notified the FBI. And they went out and they caught him. Mm-hmm. And they had, he and his girlfriend, who had been his live-in wife, they had cut some holes in the sheetrock where they hid, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. And when he fled Boston, he was, going to California and had a ton of cash. Some think that he had over $3 million in cash, and he hid it in the walls. He'd been hard pressed. There had been a fire, and that he'd have been in deep trouble. But they caught him, and then they sent him back and tried him. He went to prison, and he was beaten to death in prison. Mm-hmm. That some of the people that thought that he had squealed on them, everything, they beat him to death, pulverized him. And so it was a tough.
He was an old guy too when he was there.
Yeah, he was in his
up in
60s or 70s.
Yeah.
But Whitey Bulger, he was there 16 years. The first person on the list was Thomas Holden, and he was a bank robber. See, back in the 30s and 40s, 50s, bank robbers and kidnapping. And then if you follow the crimes in the 10 most wanted list, a lot of them changed. And there was one guy that was caught on there was producing child pornography, and then a lot of dope dealers. Times have changed, the crimes have changed, and they've tried to stay on top of it with their 10 most wanted list.
Remember in the 70s, all the hijackings?
Hijacking the airplanes.
Yeah. That was a big crime.
I one time went to a football game. Tech and Rice, and we go down and we fly down one Saturday morning, and E.J. Holub was with me. He and a lawyer, George Nelson, and a couple other guys, and E.J. Holub was there, and we got to there'd been some hijackings, and we were flying out of Houston International, and some woman dropped a jar of pickles. And when it hit the floor, the vacuum of it sounded like a gun going off. and you look down, and there's pickles all over your shoes and boots and everything. And Holub said, "I've been pickled to death." And he was a good guy, and he was the first connection that Texas Tech had with the Kansas City Chiefs. But getting back to the FBI list, 532, and there's been 400. And let me see here, 494 of the 532, so 93% have been caught. And I think they'll probably get some more publicity. It wouldn't surprise me if Trump didn't come out and talk about the 10 most wanted or something like that.
He's going to get them all, right?
The funny thing about him, he'll be going along making some speech about something. He'll think about something. And when he was at the Department of Justice making that speech last week, he's going along and started talking about Bobby Knight, and that Knight was living in Lubbock, but they had asked him to endorse President Trump in 2016 for the Indiana primary. And so Knight goes up to make a speech for him, and makes a good speech, and everything's fine. And he gets through, and he goes off stage, and Trump's up talking, and here comes Knight. He's coming back. And he said, "Yes, Coach." And Coach said, "I forgot to tell him something." And he said, okay, yeah, go ahead. He said, like, this guy's got the courage to drop the big one. If he needs to drop the nuclear warhead on somebody, he will. Don't be afraid to hire him. He's the reason you need to hire him. And he said, everybody's, all the questions afterward, you think you'll ever drop the nuclear bomb? He said,
thanks, Coach.
Coach, you didn't have to bring that up. Right. It's pretty funny. Pretty funny.
We got you mentioned a record earlier from Utah State, but a different kind of record. Got a email this week asking about the Bobby Bear Irving Berlin story about he was going to sue him or something.
Bobby Bear is a country and western singer. He sang 500 Miles Away from Home was one of his big hits, Detroit City. And one of his famous songs was Drop Kick Me Jesus Through the Goalpost of Life.
Right.
End over end, neither left or the right. Dead through the middle, center of the uprights. He wrote a song called God Bless America Again. And, it was doing okay. And he gets a phone call from a lawyer in New York. And the lawyer said, Mr. Bear, I'm so-and-so, and I represent Irving Berlin. Do you know who that is? And he said, yeah, he's a songwriter. He's a damn good one. And the guy said, you have infringed on his rights, copying his song, and we're demanding you stop immediately.
And the song was God Bless America, right?
And they were claiming, he was representing Irving Berlin on God Bless America. Okay. Well, Bobby Bear says, look, my song is God Bless America Again. It's not the same words, not the same tune. It's, it adds another word. And the guy talked to him and told him they were going to do this. And they told him that they were going to make it tough on him. And he said, look, when I was 12 years old, my mother died when I was 5, and my dad ran off and left me in a hotel. He said, and you think you're going to do something to me that's tough? I said, hell, wake up, guy. And he then talked to him about stopping it and everything. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send y'all my new song. I've written some new songs and called Easter Bonnet Again. I'm dreaming of White Christmas again. He named off about 10 Irving Berlin songs, and the guy finally hung up. He never did hear any more from him. And so Bobby Bear, he still played God Bless America Again. It's still out there. It never did catch on like God Bless America.
Right.
But he was a pretty funny guy. I've been around him a few times, and he was real friends with the people that owned KLLL, the country and western story station in Lubbock. And that station, Waylon Jennings used to work down there. Mm-hmm. One of our guys in the dorm knew him pretty well. And they'd go down there, and he'd be playing. They were on top of the Great Plains Life building, tallest building in West Texas. And so they'd go down there, and they'd get a case of beer out at the strip, and they'd go down, and there was a payphone, and they'd call him, and he was on the 21st floor, and so he'd put on Marty Robbins' song of El Paso, out in the West Texas town of El Paso, mm-hmm. And so he'd put that on, start playing, and he'd take off running. Waylon would, as hard as he'd go down the hall, hit that elevator button, go down the front floor, and then run over and open the door and take off running back to the elevator. They could, get their way up there on their own. And he'd race back, and he'd usually make it without any problems.
About a 5-minute song, I think.
It's about a 5-minute song, yeah. So he had a few minutes. And every once in a while, at night, if I was riding along listening to KLLL and they started singing El Paso, I knew that somebody had taken him some beer down there, and that Waylon was going to drink a little beer and play a few more records. And sometimes it'd run over, and it'd reset and play again. Mm-hmm. So if you heard El Paso, the song El Paso, if you heard it 2 times in a row, that he had a bunch of guys he was letting in and bringing in a case or 2 of beer for his own entertainment. It's always pretty funny. We could tell listening to KLLL.
That's funny.
if Waylon Jennings, what he was going to do. Waylon Jennings is originally from Littlefield, is between Dimmitt and Lubbock, and a banker in Littlefield heard him at a talent contest, and he told his dad he needs to get into singing. He can forget about everything else. He needs to start singing. He can do it. And then he got a job with a radio station, and also he'd play at the nightclub at a Holiday Inn or something. I mean, they weren't glamorous places. And Roy Clark, one of the great country and western singers, he had the song. It was a French song called "Yesterday When I Was Young," and he played in some places, but he played in a place in Tennessee, and he got in there and got to looking at it, and he thought, "What on earth?" And there was chicken wire for like a wire fence for chicken, and around the dance stand. And they had it, and that way people couldn't throw bottles at them, because they got where if they didn't like them, they just throw bottles at them. And so they had it where the crowd could not throw tomatoes or bottles or anything like that. And he said he had never seen that before, but he saw it a few more times in his career. That he had an old motorcycle, and he drove it into one of the bars and revved it up real loud, at Harley Davidson. And there was a lady on the front row. He had some problems with the motor. It didn't hold oil well, and as he revved it up, it just blew oil all over the place. She had on a white dress. It was just covered in oil, and they never did ask Clark to come back on that.
Boy, he could play guitar and a banjo.
Yeah, I mean, he was a talented guy.
Yeah, he was
talented guy, and had a lot of songs, a lot of stories, and would entertain. He entertained big time, and was well thought of, and was well liked by everyone. Rudy Gatlin, who we had on not too long ago, talked about Roy Clark was a good guy. Rudy tells you, he and his brothers, when they were moving up the ladder, they found who was nice and who wasn't, and who ignored them, and said Buck Owens was a good guy, the pride of Bakersville, and that he was always encouraging to the guys that were, a little lower on the totem pole and were trying to work their way up. Wrapping it up, saying of the day, it takes one to catch one. A guy ran for sheriff on that basis. He did not get elected. And there was another guy in Montgomery County had a bumper sticker. He'd been tried and found not guilty, and it said, "Vote for so-and-so, he's been tried." It didn't work. So if you have to use something of a crime in your bumper sticker, probably not going to work. Enjoy the basketball. You've got Thursday and Saturday games coming up, and then you've got the Friday and Sunday, and there'll be somebody beat someone that'll just destroy your bracket within the first hour or so if you're not careful. Good luck, and we'll talk to you next week.